Hello, my name is Sandy Adamitis, the social media director for the Page International Screenwriting Awards, and your host for the Writers Hangout, a podcast that celebrates the many stages of writing, from inspiration to the first draft, revising, getting a project made, and everything in between. We'll talk to the best and the brightest in the entertainment industry and create a space where you can hang out, learn from the pros, and have fun. Hey, writers, it's Sandy. We have a fantastic show for you today as we continue to celebrate our sponsor, the Page Awards 20th anniversary, with 2018 Page Awards grand prize winner, Kevin Bachar. His screenplay, The Inhabitant, starring Dermot Mulroney and Leslie Bibb. Come on, don't you love both of them? Came out last year in theaters and can be found on high-end streamers currently like Amazon Prime and Hulu. Remember, writers, the Page Awards final deadline is tomorrow, Monday, May 15th at 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. So if you want to get your script in the running, please go to pageawards.com. That's pageawards.com. And for those of you who have already entered, thank you very much. Now let's start the show. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us on the Writers Hangout.
Oh, thanks for inviting me, Sandy.
Hey, are you on the East Coast right now?
I am. I'm actually in New York, where it's finally hit really sort of like summer, spring. It's the perfect time. It's sort of 70s and sunny, kind of putting all the winter behind us.
Oh, I am so jealous. I mean, I love New York in the spring and, of course, Christmas time.
Yeah. In about 2 months, when it's sort of end of July, early August, and you're basically swimming in the humidity, it's the worst, which you don't really get that out in LA. You don't get that humidity, which is good.
No, we don't. And I would say up to 5 years ago, we didn't even have mosquitoes, but now we have mosquitoes and, but no humidity. So that's a good thing. Hey, congratulations on The Inhabitant.
Thank you.
How exciting was it to get that movie made?
I mean, it was pretty cool. Look, I'm not going to lie. I was, doing the happy dance and sort of seeing it in theaters, because it was released in theaters, was cool. And then, seeing it show up on the high-end streamers, whether it was Amazon or Apple or Hulu, was cool. So the sort of wow and coolness factor still hasn't worn off. And I don't think it ever will, because anybody to get a film sort of through the whole gates from beginning to end and get it out there is kind of a miracle. So I'll always sort of cherish this little miracle.
For the listeners out there, can you tell us the plot of The Inhabitant? I know you
Sure.
don't want to give away too much, because everybody who's listening is going to watch it this weekend.
From your mouth to God's ears, as they say. Well, it's what we like to call an elevated horror film, meaning it's not just sort of roar and gore, though there is gore in it. And it's based on sort of the Lizzie Borden myth. Lizzie Borden was an axe murderess, never convicted, but she was accused of killing her father and stepmother with an axe in the late 1800s in Massachusetts. It was sort of a huge deal. Think of all the big murder trials we have around today, and that's what it was sort of then. It was sort of this huge deal.
Yes.
And she was acquitted, so she never went to jail. But, everybody kind of whispered, yeah, she did it. There's no other suspects. And so The Inhabitant follows modern times, a teenager who's a descendant of Lizzie. And she's 17, senior year, and she starts having visions of Lizzie Borden. And she starts getting these feelings of wanting to cause harm on her family. And at the same time, some people go missing in town, possibly murdered. So it's a question of, is it her? Is it something more deeper and scarier and mysterious? And so the film sort of tracks that from beginning to end.
It gives me chills just listening to you talk about
you're so kind.
Now, I have a two-part question. I read in an interview that while writing The Inhabitant, you consciously decided to write something that was easy to produce and had a relatively low budget. Why? Aren't you supposed to just hit it out of the park, do whatever you want? It's your time. You're writing a spec. Do what you want.
Look, that's what everybody, write what you feel and just put it on the paper and
Yes.
don't worry about it and this and that. And that just look, that's fine. That's great. You might write that great script that is the space opera 3-part series that puts Dune to shame on the planet Zoltron, and it might be great. But the honest to God's truth is, most managers, most producers who are looking and read that, their eyes are going to roll a little when they read that first line about, on the planet Zoltron, the princess blah blah goes to this planet and gets, because it's really hard to produce those films. And most of the time, everybody's looking for IP, already intellectual property, and novels and stories and comic books, whatever, that are already based on that for those types of films. I mean, that's the absolute
Right.
truth. And so what is the easiest thing to produce, and what's the thing still doing, even through the pandemic, that still did box office, is sort of a horror. Horror sort of thriller. And
Right.
so that just is sort of what's easier to get made. I mean, just because of the budget, just because of locations and so forth. So
Budget.
yeah,
And it doesn't mean you can't write that great sequel or prequel to Dune with your own characters. Just write a script that can come with a lower budget.
yeah, that can get made and can work with sort of, that. I was consciously thinking, okay, I'm going to write something under 2 million, because I had written a horror film called Peak of Fear, did kind of well in festivals, got a couple eights on Blacklist, and it was based
Kevin,
on,
that's a great title.
yeah, it was based on a true story. You'll find out later on in this interview that I also do documentary films, and I was doing a documentary film on Mount Washington, which is this mountain in New Hampshire where more people have died on it than Everest at a certain point. And so
Oh,
it's
are
this,
they climbing or
yeah,
hiking?
climbing and
Okay.
hiking and so forth. And I spent this weather observatory up there that during the winter, there are 2 people up there. And basically, when you're in the middle of the storms, you can't come down because they get 200-mile-per-hour winds. And we were up there. And of course, you start talking about ghost stories and weird things happened. Like, I don't necessarily believe in ghosts, but things would move where you thought, did I move it or whatever? And it could be because of the altitude. It could be because of the cold. I had wacky dreams. Anyway, I wrote it, and it's a good script, but it's more in the $2 million to $10 million range or $15 million range, because you're going to need some special effects. You're going to have snow. You're going to have
Right.
this. It had multiple locations. It was going to be that, and it's sort of like, well, that's going to be harder to make. So I sat down and said, okay, let me write a horror thriller, limited cast, limited locations, shoot anywhere, no real big special effects, and less than 100 pages. And that's how The Inhabitant sort of happened. And you're
Perfection.
going to get a lot of people saying, "Oh, well, you're writing by the numbers and you're doing this," and it's like, no, I still created a story with rich characters and so forth, but it's also knowing what's getting made.
Yeah, exactly. Like in the early days of MTV videos, when you didn't have a budget, they became very creative.
Yeah, yeah. If
And
you do sort of like the renegade filming, it's Robert Rodriguez style of shooting too, from his early films.
right. Now, you've also said, oh, by the way, I have to backtrack. You were in a weather tower that you can't get down because of bad weather,
Yeah,
and you
it's the
told ghost
yeah the
stories.
wet yeah the
That's
weather's
a dream of mine.
yeah.
I
You
I
you
would love to do that.
you could not get down because the winds were so bad and the storms and so forth. So you kind of up there. It's like you're on the surface of the moon. It's sort of
Wow.
you.
And how do you get up to this tower? Because I'm going to look it up.
We
I'm going to
it's
Google it
so it's the
afterwards.
Mount Washington Weather Observatory, and
Mhm.
we went up there mid-February, and we had to get up there by a snowcat. One of these sort of looks like a bulldozer, takes you up the side of the mountain. That's the only way you can get up there. I mean, you could hike,
Oh,
but you could die hiking.
yeah. I'll take the snowcat.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, back to you. Now, you've said the best way into the industry is through a horror thriller with a
Mhm.
hook or a twist. And I'm quoting you, mine was the attachment of the Lizzie Borden myth set in modern times. Now, did you play with other legends? Were you always a fan of Lizzie Borden? We all know the nursery rhyme that we did as kids. Like, for example, the Bell Witch. Did you think of any other kind of urban legends?
Bell Witch is a spooky one, and I think they've done a film on it, but that doesn't mean you can't do another. I mean, geez,
Right.
there's been a few Lizzie
Did
Borden
you want to
films.
do Lizzie right from the start?
I had done a documentary for the History Channel called The Trial of Lizzie Borden. And it was looking at the Lizzie Borden story. And we shot in the courtroom because it's still there in Massachusetts. And we shot in her Fall River, where she was from. And we shot in her home, which is now a bed and breakfast. You could stay in the house where these gruesome murders took place. You know, it's sort of
Get out of town. Did you
right.
stay there?
Did not stay there, but film there. And so I
Wow.
incorporated all these elements because I knew them all. Like at one point in my film, The Inhabitant, Tara, the main character, the teenager, goes to stay there with her boyfriend to find out if she's being possessed by Lizzie Borden. So I knew all this stuff. So it sort of all got sort of weaved into the screenplay because I knew about it. So it's like taking an existing IP, an intellectual property that people have a familiarity with, and turning it into a script. So that becomes sort of when agents or producers are looking, I go, oh yeah, I know that story. Oh yeah, Lizzie Borden. Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her mother 40 whacks. I mean, people kind of remember that stuff.
Did you, as a writer, as a creative, wander around the house? Can you get a feeling there? I mean, is too much time passed? It's remodeled, or did you feel anything?
You know, that's one of those things where it's sort of because I've been to a lot of places where things have happened in film places and done things again because of my documentary work. And so you're in a place like that and you do get a feeling. And I've been in other places, tombs and so forth, where you get a feeling. And is it a feeling? Is it really sort of something there? Or is it just because you're thinking, oh my God, somebody died here? It's like there used to be blood all over this floor. Is it just that uneasiness? Is that the feeling you're getting? Or is it
Right.
something? It's hard. Like, oh, when you're up at Machu Picchu or some of these places that are mysterious and have a mystical feeling for it, and you're up there and it feels kind of weird and kind of different. Oh well, you're also up at like 6,000 feet where there's less oxygen, so
You're right.
you feel a little tingly and weird because of that. It's sort of it might not be because it's this mystical place. So
Um,
I don't want to
what's the most
discount it, but there was a feeling there.
what's the most mystical place you feel that you've stood in?
It was in Egypt. I was inside the pyramids. I was filming for National Geographic, and that
Wow.
felt so. I was in the main chamber inside. There's a chamber all the way inside, and that felt really.
Yes.
Yeah,
Was it a good feeling or like I could leave now?
no, it's a good film. I mean, you can't be in there if you're claustrophobic because it's right in the middle of that massive pyramid. But
Yeah.
it just there's a feeling to it. Again, is it because you've seen this place and all these stories and photos and you're finally there? Is it there really a feeling there?
It wasn't till I think 5 years ago, I always envisioned that the pyramids, like you'd have to, get in a Jeep and travel outside the city for,
Yeah,
20 miles.
no.
Yeah, there you can stand in the city and see them.
Yeah, they're right on the outskirts of the city. The city
That's
kind of is there,
wild.
and then the desert starts, and it's right there. Now there are other pyramids all throughout Egypt, farther away along the Nile and so forth that you do have to head out more. But nope, the Great Pyramids, as they're called, are right there on the outskirts of Cairo.
Yeah, I would love to at least touch a pyramid once. Now, with The Inhabitant, you wrote it in 2015
Right.
and it was optioned in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to the writers who want to knock it out of the park on their first script?
Look, we all want to knock it out. Like this wasn't my first script. I had written, as I mentioned, Peak of Fear. I wrote something else. Written 3 or 4 other films, and I wrote The Inhabitant in 2015. put it up on the blacklist. It got a lot of 8s, got a bunch of 4s too. So never get discouraged if that's happening to you. But they
Good.
featured it. Again, this is the blacklist website, not the blacklist that comes out with the Hollywood films and so forth. So
Oh, right,
yeah.
right.
And so on the website,
Franklin Leonard, and is that his name, the gentleman who
yeah,
started that?
yeah.
Yes.
And so if a film gets a lot of great reviews and they're industry readers, then they will feature it. They create a movie poster for it, and for that period it's featured. They send out a tweet about it, Instagram and so forth. And so that happened to The Inhabitant. It was called Blood Relative at that point.
That's another good title. I like
Yeah.
Blood. Why did they change it, or did you change it?
No, the producers changed it, and sort of once they buy the script, and that's another thing you'll learn. And once they buy the script, it's not yours anymore. It's
Yes.
you've sold it. Just like when you sell your car, that car isn't yours anymore. You can't go in and drive it if you need a car. If they want to change the title, they change the title.
Absolutely. And while selling it, you took no chances. You even created a mood board, which I thought was so interesting.
Yeah. Here's the other thing too. It's sort of like, okay, you write the script. Well, how do you, it's always saying, what do I do with it now? Well, enter it into the Page Awards, enter it into other screenplay festivals, trying to get people to know about it. If you do well, you'll get promoted. Also put it on the blacklist. When you're sending it out, create a mood board or a pitch deck, as they call, which we did. We created also a proof of concept sizzle where we took scenes from other films and we created basically the trailer for The Inhabitant before we shot a frame of film. So people could get a
Excellent.
sense of like, oh, what are the comps to this film? Comps, again, meaning similar films. And so by taking bits and pieces from other films that had a similar feel to what we were looking for The Inhabitant, people got to go, oh, I could see how this could be a film. Oh, I could see how it could be in this sort of feeling and so forth. So again, that takes money, that takes time, but that's what you have to do. It doesn't happen magically. You have to put the effort in. You have to put your time in. Oh, well, that costs money to enter the Page Awards, or that costs money to produce a pitch deck or hire somebody. It's like, yeah, that's right. Just like if you want to become the best figure skater in the world, you have to pay for all those time on the ice. You have to pay for all those coaches. You have to put in all that time. It's the same thing. It's sort of,
Kevin, what an interesting way to equate that with sports career.
yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard it expressed that way before. That really is succinct and to the point.
Yeah, you're trying to be one of the best in the world because there are a limited amount of films being made and screenwriters and writers. So what do you need to do to get to that? What do you need to do to get people to see you? It's sort of, you have to put your work out there and elevate it in a way maybe other people aren't doing it. It's like, again, while that costs money. And I've said this before, it's sort of like, well, what do you do for lunch every day? Oh, you go to Subway, you go to Chipotle. Oh, well, that's about, probably like 10, $12 a day. Oh, well,
Mhm.
you get Starbucks. Oh, that's another $3. Oh, well, that's like already you're up to $15, $18 a day. Well, guess what? Take that $18 a day and make yourself a sandwich every day and make yourself coffee and bring it in every day. And now you have that $18 every day. And now you could start reinvesting into sort of festivals or readers or creating mood boards and creating proof of concepts and hire people and so forth. And what have you given up? Nothing really.
It, exactly. These careers don't happen magically.
Right.
There's a lot, and that's what it means when they say, you put in the work ahead of time and it seems like overnight success, and it isn't. And also, we live in a time when you can do these supplemental, like do a proof of concept trailer, where, what would you say, 15, 20 years ago, you couldn't do it on an iPhone, or, it was a lot
Right.
tougher. So why not take advantage?
Exactly. Yeah. And look, creating a pitch deck, don't create a 20-page pitch deck. It was like 8 pages, 7 pages, just to give you a sense of the look and the feel and what this thing is going to be. And it's easy enough to
Right.
do. You could create it. There's numerous sort of programs where you can create really nice pitch decks.
Yeah. Kevin, is there any chance that I could get a couple of graphics that I can put up to show people what you
Sure.
meant?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, I think the writers out there would just love that, to really see that early stages. Thank you. That would be great.
Yeah, and that's when it was called The Relative. It was blood relative, then it became the relative, and then it became the inhabitant.
Yeah, I like all three actually. I mean, because the inhabitant, I really get is there something in her?
Yeah.
It says it right there.
Mm-hmm.
But I do like the blood relative because you never know when your relatives, what's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, Now, you transitioned from film content for National Geographic, which that term film content really I didn't like because what you did was so much bigger than what that sounds, to writing feature screenplays. What were movies always a goal for you? Did you always know you wanted to be a writer?
I didn't always know I wanted to be a writer, but I love stories. I love movies. I grew up in Queens. I grew up in an apartment in Queens. I've said this before. I'm a child of public schools. So again, if people like, oh well, that person knows this part, or they grew up rich, or they did, it's sort of like, nope,
Mm-hmm.
nope, 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 nope. I'll take you to my neighborhood. You'll roll up the windows of the car and go like, let's drive through here fast, you know. But love movies. I love stories. I loved reading, and I was terrible at math. I was terrible at chemistry, but words and the places like social studies and English, when you're reading, I loved. I loved animals. My mom used to keep a thing because I think it was like 8 years old that I wrote like, I want to film and study wolves when I was a little kid. And
Oh,
I ended up doing that. I started out at National Geographic, and then for my own production company, I do work for National Geographic, Discovery. I do mostly focusing on wildlife, but I've done action adventure, done ride-alongs with cops, have been on war zones. And I've spoken that I think that helps my writing to a certain extent because I've been in war zones. And I think that helps my writing because I kind of know what the sound of a gun sort of really sounds like, or what it smells like after it's been shot, or what it's like to be on a front line and worried about what's 100 yards away. I did that documentary work, and then I started thinking, oh, what if I started putting this into fiction, into screenwriting? A novel,
right.
500 pages, 400 pages for a novel seemed out of the question, but there's something about 100 pages on a screenplay that seems a little more manageable.
I agree 100%. Growing up, did you watch TV? Did you go to the movies? And
Yeah,
what did you like? What did you watch when you were younger?
I loved documentaries, so not to be the nerdy kid, because I wasn't much of a
Were you a
nerdy
Jacques
kid.
Cousteau fan?
Yeah, I love Jacques Cousteau. I love
Oh,
National Geographic
Jacques.
and stuff like that. And then a little older, I loved ER. I loved the pace of it, the style of it. I loved X
Mhm.
Files. I loved the standalone bottle episodes. The overall myth of it I liked, but the single episodes I loved. And in terms of movies, I mean, Indiana Jones, Planet of the Apes, James Bond, the popcorn on a Friday night. I loved Exorcist. I loved, and Jaws was a huge film for me, huge film because it sort of, it also set me on the path of wanting to do natural history and watching Jaws as a kid. And now I've done about 16 films on sharks for Shark Fest on National Geographic. I've done Shark Week films. I've done a PBS nature special on sharks of Hawaii that aired just last year. And then I did a film for A&E called Jaws Inside Story, which was a look at the making of Jaws,
Oh, how
and
cool for
got to
you.
interview and work with Steven Spielberg on that. And that was actually nominated for a Prime-Time Emmy Award.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
That is
and so,
so wonderful.
and again,
Do people corner you at cocktail parties and just want to talk sharks?
people are fascinated with sharks and just love hearing about it and so forth, and sort of like, oh, are sharks near me? Do I have to be worried about a shark in the water? And like, there's a famous test you could do to see if there's sharks in the water with you. It's a simple thing. You dip your finger in the water, and if you taste it and it's salty, guess what? There's sharks in the water with you. They're right there.
I,
So
Kevin,
there's your shark test. You could take that every time you go into the ocean.
Kevin, I actually leaned in when you gave that tip for the sharks. I truly believed you. You are adorable. I wanted to double back to ER because one of my favorite episodes that when you mentioned it, immediately it flashed across my mind. You know what I'm going to say, right? The
Yeah,
kid.
it's the kid in the drain.
Yes.
Yep. I saw that episode, and I think it sticks with everybody. I mean, George Clooney was phenomenal in that, and it's if you look at it, it's what everybody says. Oh, you should write now a contained thriller. That's a contained thriller. It's set at that one spot, basically. It's not set in the hospital. It's set at that drain pipe with the rain coming, and George Clooney has to save that kid.
Absolutely.
Yep. Yep.
You know, you and I follow each other on Twitter, and you have such an exciting life. I even saw you just post a photo. You were in a high rise. I think you were in New York, probably Manhattan, but a big storm was rolling in. It was such a cool photo. It was like, nope, Kevin's not just going to show you the sun in the sky. A storm was coming in. Now, it's unusual. I mean, can you share what it's like to be a person of action and also a person who can sit down and write? How does that amazing brain of yours work? You don't usually get that combination.
Yeah, so my work in documentaries has me sort of hanging off of mountains and swimming with sharks and chasing tornadoes and volcanoes and so forth. And then I have to sit down and then try to write screenplays and so forth. And I find it relaxing. I think it's sort of it's a nice difference because you can't do that other stuff all the time because it's just too much. It's too intense. You'll get burnt out really quickly. So being able to suddenly stop, sit, and just put yourself into the writing works really well. I also make this analogy too, where when you're doing a documentary film, and I'm gonna try to film these sharks eating these seals. Well, I have to go there and I have to get on the boat, and then I have to hope that the sharks are there. I have to hope that the weather's good. I have to hope the seals are there, and then I have to hope the sharks is hungry and so forth. When I'm writing a screenplay, I just write that and it's there. It's done. You know, it's sort of I have the shark eating the seal and it's done. It's sort of like I don't have to do all that other stuff. So I
And you're
find this,
dry.
yeah, and I'm dry. I find the screenwriting sort of relaxing and very different. So that's
That
why it
is
works.
that makes so much sense. It's, you know, if you've got a cerebral job, you like to knit because you don't have to think.
Right.
But you're kind of like well, you think in both jobs, of course. But yeah, I can see how satisfactory that must be for you to just be able to sit down and go, I have complete control.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Because when you're doing a documentary, as you know, you're not in control. That's the whole thing. You're letting whatever's happening dictate the story. And so you have no control. Whereas when you're screenwriting, you're in complete control. So
Complete
that's how
control.
it works for me. So that's exactly
That's
it.
cool. What are your writing habits? Do you write in the morning? Can you only write 2 hours a day?
Yeah, I write mostly at night, like after 11 p.m. I'm a bit of a night owl. I'm one of those people who don't need a lot of sleep. So I usually write at night, like from sometimes 11 to 3 or so. And I always try to get at least 5 pages out. I do a lot of rereading, like write it, reread, and just keep changing and so forth.
You know, you are the very first nighttime writer. Everybody I've spoken to really likes to get up early in the morning and write. Fascinating. And the reading and fixing. When I'm writing, I do the same exact thing. And all the books say, I might have started with Stephen King. I think he was one of the first ones who's like, keep pushing. You got to push. Just don't go back. And for the writers out there that do like Kevin, just do what's good for you. Correct? What do you think?
Right. That's exactly it. It's sort of, to read some of these books or hear me talking, it's sort of like that works for me. It might not work for you. It's sort of whatever works for you, that's what you should do. It's sort of there really aren't any rules, when it comes to what
Hmm.
works for you in writing. So if you like to write in the morning and you don't want to reread, you want to go through it all, then that's what you should do. You like writing only from 1 a.m. to 3:30 a.m. and you have to have a cup of coffee and two number two pencils and you do it by hand. But if that works for you, do it.
Excellent. I have this theory that the time of day you are born correlates with if you're a morning person or a nighttime person. Were you born in the early morning hours? Do you know?
I don't know. That's a good question. Boy, now you got me, wanting to sort of find the birth certificate and find out, or sort of ask my dad, hey, when was I born?
Yes, I please do that. And if you're asking your dad, well, let's be honest, you might not get an answer.
Yeah, you're right. He might not remember. And he
But
might
in
not have
his
been there.
defense, he wasn't actually doing the birthing, so
No,
maybe
that's exactly it.
yeah. Do you have any writing superstitions?
I do dip two number two pencils into the blood of a sacrificed goat on the last full moon of every month. So I don't know. Does that count? Is
Yes.
that it? Okay? So yes, I guess I do have a superstition.
Yes. But the important thing is, do you do it in the morning or at night?
I do that, of course, at night because I'm a
Okay,
night
good.
person. Yeah.
Now, starting out, what was your biggest misconception about being a working writer?
I don't know if I had any misconceptions. It's sort of, again, I think it's different for everybody. I think sort of like, sort of, oh, am I going to have to put in 8 hours a day of just writing? Well, some people will, some people like to work in a shorter period of time and spend that other time sort of thinking or reading other work. A lot of times when I'm writing, I'll take a break and I'll read other people's scripts or short stories and so forth, just to sort of like, oh, wow, look at the way they did that. Or, oh, look, that's a nice little idea there and so forth. Not to steal it, but to sort of like, oh, the way they did that.
Oh,
Um,
100% for inspiration. There is
yeah,
nothing better than to read scripts, kind of in the genre maybe of what you're writing, to just see how it's done.
yeah. And so I don't think I had any misconceptions. I think the biggest thing that surprised me was sort of that old sort of like, oh my God, how am I going to fill 100 pages? And boy, you could do that really easy. It's sort of, it's like, that's why you get 130 first draft, 130 page first drafts or whatever, because once you start writing and you start really building these characters and putting stuff that you're going to take out. But I was a little surprised at how easy it was to actually fill the pages.
That's a really good point and something I hope the writers out there take away. Kevin, you're so right. It fills up. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, exactly. You're right too. Don't worry about it. Just write.
Yeah. Are you working on anything right now?
Let's see. I'm working on a script. I can't talk much about it, but I am working with. I sold another screenplay called El Monstruo, which is a shark screenplay. So, and that's based on a real shark. Again, tying into that sort of trying to look at existing
Oh,
myths and so forth.
really?
Yeah,
That sounds amazing.
yeah. And I finished a script for. There was a horror film from the Philippines called Eerie, which did well on Netflix. The producer Jin Kai Khan Chan. I worked with him and wrote a screenplay for him, a sort of a thriller called Skins, and so that's hopefully moving forward. And I've been writing short stories because that's really, you're seeing that more and more. That's a way of sort of getting things made into films, and I also like writing short stories in terms of as a way to sort of look at them as, can these be possible screenplays?
Hmm. Are your short stories different in any way from what you usually write, or you're staying in your wheelhouse?
I'm staying in my wheelhouse. They're sort of horror thrillers, so they're still in that
Yeah.
wheelhouse. I'm not writing sort of drama or introspective pieces on the human condition. It's more that sort of thriller, horror sort of genre.
Right. It's making me think of Night Shift.
Yes, yes, Stephen King's Night Shift. When I grew up, I read a short story, In versus the Ants, which turned into a movie called Naked Jungle. There was To Build a Fire by Jack London. And, movies nowadays, Arrival, which was the great movie a couple of years ago, Jeremy Renner. Um,
Mhm.
and I forget the actress, the red-haired actress.
Oh, and we love her. She's
Yeah.
a national treasure.
Yes.
She says, "Now that's a proper introduction."
Yeah, that's it. You actually got the tone of her voice. It's very soft. Yeah.
If only we knew her name.
If only there was some sort of device we could click on and find that person's name.
Exactly. Do you wanna share your social medias?
Sure. Yeah. I'm on Twitter at Kevin Pangolin, Pangolin. And that's because my production company is called Pangolin Pictures. So I'm at Kevin Pangolin. If we connect and you DM me for some questions, I'm usually real open to talking and chatting. I'm on Instagram, and that's just Kevin Bachar, Bachar. And then I hang out on screenwriting Reddit occasionally, and that's Pangolin Pix, Pix. When I'm on there, that's how you'll know I'm on that. If you see Pangolin Picks. So that's kind of my social media there.
Cool. Thank you so much for answering all those questions.
They were good questions. Thank you so much, Sandy.
Oh, yay. Now, before you go, would you like to play a lightning round of brain drops?
Sure thing. I have no idea what this is, but I'm always game.
I knew you would be, Kevin. Brain Drops is a fast-paced Q&A with answers only a writer can provide. So I have, 14 questions here. For example, where do you write? You could say office, bed, Starbucks, blah, blah, blah. We'll see how many you can get in 1 minute. I'm going to start the timer. When writing, music on or off?
Off.
If you're reading a hard copy of a script, 1 Brad or 2?
1.
Final draft or Celtics?
Final draft.
Favorite snack while writing?
Don't eat.
Do you come up with a script title at the beginning or end?
Sometimes both.
Writing at home, PJs, sweats, or clothes?
Clothes.
Shading parking spot right next to the set or $10K in the budget?
$10K in the budget.
How do you choose the name of a character?
Just random.
Research or wing it?
Research.
Looking for the right word, you go to the thesaurus, wait till it comes to you, Google.
Thesaurus.
You got 11 questions.
Oh.
I think that's good, but here's the rest of the questions.
Okay, shoot.
Writer's block, real or fake?
Fake for me.
Favorite time to write? Well, we know this one. Day or night?
Night.
Is watching television or a movie research?
Research.
Yes, I agree. Kevin, thank you so much. Really, really enjoyed this. And I think our writers out there are going to take away a lot from this interview.
Well, I hope so. And this was really a pleasure. And it was so nice meeting you and chatting with you, Sandy.
Great. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's a wrap for the Writers Hangout. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, like, and thrive. Till we get to hang out again, keep writing. The world needs your stories. The Writers Hangout is sponsored by the Page International Screenwriting Awards. Executive producer, Kristen O'Verne. Producers, Terry Sampson and Sandy Adamitis. Music by Ethan Stoller.